The desert, even in its silence, remembers. Beneath the endless dunes, where wind carves slow rivers through gold, there are places where stone still stands, silent witnesses to a time before time. If you walk far enough across the Sahara, past the mirages and the heat shimmer, you reach open plains where weather-worn rocks rise like forgotten sentinels. They are not random. They are arranged, aligned, deliberate. They speak a language older than words, a geometry of faith, sky, and survival. One of these places lies far south of modern Egypt, in a remote basin called Nabta Playa. To stand there at dusk is to stand inside a question. In the fading light, a circle of megaliths catches the dying sun, their shadows stretching across the sand like lines on a sundial built for the gods. Archaeologists believe this stone circle was raised around 7,000 years ago, long before Stonehenge or the pyramids of Giza. The people who built it watched the heavens with patient devotion. They tracked the rising of the star Sirius, the coming of rains, the turning of seasons. Each stone marked a rhythm, each alignment a promise between earth and sky. It is humbling to imagine nomads, dressed in hides, carving out calendars in the middle of a savanna that no longer exists. The desert hides their names, but their intelligence still glows through the precision of the stones. As the night deepens, those same stones seem to glow beneath the moonlight. You can almost feel them breathing, absorbing centuries of wind and starlight, whispering their stories into the sand. Across the Sahara, similar monuments wait, some barely visible, some eroded to stumps, others still majestic despite millennia of storms. In Mali stands Tondidera, a field of upright stones carved into human shapes. Their faces are stylized, their eyes long and solemn, their posture both human and divine. Local legend says they are ancestors turned to stone, guardians of a vanished kingdom. Archaeologists date them to around 3000 BC, proof that organized communities flourished here long before recorded empires. Each statue holds its silence like a prayer. When the wind moves through them, you can almost hear the rhythm of drums, the chanting of rituals meant to bind the living and the stars. In sleep, it's easy to drift with that sound, to imagine that somewhere deep beneath the sand, whole sanctuaries still stand intact, temples aligned with constellations now dimmed by dust. The memory of stone is different from the memory of words. Words fade, but stone endures. Even when toppled, broken, or buried, stone keeps a fragment of intention. It remembers where it was placed and why. The builders of Nabta Playa and Tondidera left no scrolls, no chronicles, yet their monuments tell us they understood mathematics, symmetry, and celestial cycles. They knew that life depended on the sky's rhythm, the arrival of rain, the journey of the sun, the breath of the seasons. Every alignment was a survival manual written in granite. As the Sahara dried and the green retreated, perhaps they gathered one last time to mark the heavens, hoping the stones would preserve the knowledge their children might one day need. And so they did. Thousands of years later, the stones still point to the same stars, still catch the same solstices. It is as if they are clocks that never stopped ticking, guardians of a forgotten civilization that refused to vanish entirely. Now, as you breathe slower and softer, imagine running your hand along one of those stones. It is warm from the day, cool beneath the surface, etched with grooves that might be natural or might be deliberate. The texture feels like time itself, coarse, eternal, unyielding. You close your eyes and feel the pulse of the planet beneath your palm. The desert around you hums faintly, not with sound, but with memory. You begin to understand why early peoples treated stone as sacred. It endures storms, earthquakes, drought, and yet it stays. To build in stone was to defy impermanence, to carve existence into eternity. Each monument is both a message and a mirror. It reflects the builder's hope that something of them would outlast death, drought, and forgetting. And in that hope, they succeeded. Tonight, thousands of years later, we still listen. We still remembered, as the moon climbs higher, its light turns the desert silver, and the stones gleam like constellations fallen to earth. Around them the sand drifts in slow motion, reshaping but never erasing. It feels as if time itself is moving in circles, always returning, never ending. Across thousands of miles, other megalithic sites echo the same idea. the belief that the sky and the ground are one. In the Tassili Inajar Plateau of Algeria, ancient rock carvings show people dancing under stars, their arms raised toward constellations. In Niger, pillars stand in perfect orientation to sunrise and sunset. These are not accidents. They are proof of a shared vision stretching across the prehistoric Sahara, that life followed the stars, that the stars spoke to those who watched long enough. Perhaps these early sky watchers saw in the heavens not gods, but maps, guides to planting, migration, and balance. Perhaps they built with stone because stone was the only material strong enough to hold a conversation with eternity. When you think about it, the desert is itself a monument. Each dune a sculpture of wind, each plateau a tablet of memory. The people who raised those stones are gone, yet the desert kept their message intact, wrapped in silence instead of ink. Even erosion is gentle here. There is no rain to wash away carvings, no forest to reclaim foundations. That stillness, that dryness, is both tomb and treasure chest. Archaeologists say there could be hundreds of undiscovered monuments beneath the surface, preserved so perfectly that even tool marks remain. Ground-penetrating radar has already revealed circular structures beneath layers of sand near Nabta Playa, hinting at possible temples or gathering enclosures. Each discovery peels back another layer of the Sahara's hidden history, reminding us that civilization did not begin in one place, but in many, and that this desert once sang with voices and footsteps and songs we have only begun to hear again. If you listen closely, you might notice that the rhythm of your own breathing has started to match the slow rhythm of the desert wind. That is the secret pulse of the Sahara, the same pulse that moved ancient hands to lift stones against gravity. Imagine their effort. Hundreds of people pushing, pulling, aligning massive blocks with nothing but willpower and rope made from grass. They didn't build for wealth or fame. They built because the act itself connected them to the cosmos. Each placement was prayer. Each alignment was hope. In sleep, you can almost feel that purpose returning, a sense that the world, for all its noise, still runs on ancient harmony. Modern scientists studying these monuments find mathematical precision where they expected chaos. Ratios matching pi, alignments tracing solstices, distances corresponding to lunar cycles. Such accuracy implies not superstition but science, an early form of it, born from observation rather than instruments. To live in a world without clocks and still predict the rains required an intimacy with the sky that we, with all our technology, rarely feel. These stones are textbooks written in silence, teaching patience and attention. They remind us that knowledge was once measured not in data but in devotion. When the builders looked up, they didn't just see stars, they saw the heartbeat of the earth, and maybe, in their quiet genius, they left behind something more than monuments. Maybe they encoded a message about endurance. To exist is to be weathered. To endure is to accept change without losing form. The stones stand because they bend with the wind's memory, not against it. That lesson, carved in granite, still applies to us. Civilization, like sand, shifts, but meaning, like stone, stays. As you drift deeper into calm, imagine those megaliths glowing faintly in moonlight, their shadows sweeping the sand like slow-moving hands on a cosmic clock. They will still be there when we are gone, keeping time for whoever comes next. Tonight, as the desert sleeps and your thoughts settle like dust on cool stone, remember this. The Sahara may seem empty, but emptiness can hold infinite memory. Beneath every dune lies the echo of human touch, the proof that we once looked beyond survival toward wonder. The memory of stone is the memory of us, of what we built, what we believed, and what we dared to dream under an endless sky. Long before the pyramids lifted their perfect edges toward the sky, before the Nile carried the first boats carved by human hands, before the word pharaoh had ever been whispered, there were people who watched the sun fall behind the dunes of a green Sahara. They lived beside lakes now vanished, in valleys that are today only dust, their huts of reed and clay clustered near rivers that flowed eastward, chasing the pull of the rising light. When the rains began to fade and the grass turned to sand, they followed those waters, walking generation after generation until they reached the place we now call Egypt. To them, it was not a journey of exile, but of remembering. The Nile was a continuation of the rivers they had always known. Archaeologists have found traces of their footsteps in both worlds. Pottery shards in the high desert matching those buried along the earliest banks of the Nile, rock carvings of cattle and herders repeated like echoes from Chad to Aswan. The people before the pharaohs were not wanderers without knowledge. They were carriers of memory. They brought with them the wisdom of the desert sky, the mathematics of stars, the rhythm of planting and flood. They carried art, ritual, and the idea that stone could speak. When we look at the earliest shrines along the Nile, simple circles of rock aligned with the sun, we see the handwriting of the Sahara carved into new soil. As the centuries passed, their children learned the moods of the Nile the way their ancestors had read the clouds over the savannah. Flood and drought became sacred rhythms. From that understanding rose ceremony, belief, and eventually the idea of divine order, the same order that would later be carved into hieroglyphs and temples. Even the animals of the Sahara followed them. Cattle, goats, gazelles, all immortalized in rock art long before they became symbols of Egyptian gods. The desert was never forgotten. It became myth, heaven, afterlife, the western land where the sun died and was reborn. In this way, the first desert people shaped not only a civilization, but a cosmology. They turned geography into eternity. The pharaohs inherited a kingdom already ancient in spirit, one whose architects had practiced on the sand long before they built with limestone. If you close your eyes, you can almost see the transition, tribes watching their last lake shrink under a burning sky, deciding together to move toward the east, guided by instinct and memory. They walk for days, weeks, years, and somewhere along the way, the story of humanity changes. The journey itself becomes a legend told in stars. They brought with them not only tools and livestock, but memories written in ritual. How to call the rain, how to read the stars, how to honor the ancestors whose bones rested beneath the dunes. When they reached the Nile, they saw not a new world but an old friend, a mirror of the vanished rivers of their homeland. They settled on its fertile edges and began to plant again, shaping mud into homes, building shrines from the same stones they had once used to mark the heavens. Slowly, the pattern of their lives turned into something larger, a rhythm that would become the foundation of civilization. The earliest villages along the Nile show the fingerprints of those desert people. Round huts arranged in circles, cattle burials that mirror those of Nabta Playa, figurines of women with flowing shapes, ancestors of the goddess figures that would later represent fertility and rebirth. As generations passed, these small communities learned to channel the floodwaters, to store grain, to measure the year not by guess, but by the rising of Sirius, the same star their ancestors had watched in the western sky. From that knowledge came calendars, temples, and the first murmurs of divine kingship. The line between the desert and the river blurred. One became memory, the other manifestation. The people before the pharaohs had carried the seed of civilization through sand, and now it bloomed in the valley of life that I in their myths. You can still hear the echo of their journey. The West became the land of the dead because it was the direction of their origin, the place where the sun and their ancestors disappeared each evening. Their gods bore desert features, falcons that soared over dunes, bulls that once roamed the savannah, serpents that curled in the sand. Even the sacred concept of balance, ma'at, may have been born from the struggle to live between flood and drought, abundance and emptiness. To remember the Sahara was to remember the fragility of harmony. Every stone temple that later rose along the Nile carried traces of that lesson. Beneath its hieroglyphs lay older symbols, circles, spirals, star maps, patterns once carved on rocks deep in the desert. The pharaohs may have worn crowns of gold, but the roots of their power were made of sand. As you breathe slowly, imagine those first migrations not as hurried escapes, but as pilgrimages. Families moving with quiet purpose, guided by sky, teaching their children stories of where the world began. They left no written record, only trails of artifacts and memory, yet from their silence grew the language of eternity. To stand in modern Egypt and look west toward the Sahara is to look backward in time, toward the womb of civilization itself. Somewhere out there, under the dunes, the graves of those first dreamers still rest, their bones cradled by the same earth that gave rise to kings and gods. The people before the pharaohs never truly vanished. They became the heartbeat of a culture that would outlast empires. And in the hush of the desert night, if you listen closely, you can almost hear them breathing still. The forgotten architects of the world we inherited, the bridge between the green Sahara and the golden kingdom of the Nile, whispering softly to the stars that have always. There was a time when the Sahara was not a desert, but a living, breathing Eden. A vast emerald plain stretched beneath the sky, shimmering with lakes and rivers that sparkled like scattered mirrors of the sun. Herds of antelope grazed beneath clouds that drifted lazily across an endless sea of green. Lions prowled the tall grass, elephants bathed in shallow pools, and early humans fished with tools carved from stone. The air was heavy with the scent of rain. The rhythm of life was gentle and abundant, and for thousands of years, this was the heart of Earth's fertility, not its emptiness. But the Earth moves in cycles, and nature has a quiet way of reclaiming her balance. The same forces that gave birth to paradise began, slowly and silently, to take it away. The monsoon rains that once swept across North Africa began to weaken. The axis of the Earth shifted by fractions of degrees, changing the dance between the sun and the seasons. Each year the rains came a little later, stayed a little shorter, and the rivers that had once nourished the land began to fade. Lakes shrank, grass turned brittle beneath the scorching wind, and the songs of frogs and birds became fainter until they disappeared entirely. The people who had lived beside those waters began to notice the change, first in their crops, then in their animals, and finally in themselves. They built deeper wells, moved their camps closer to the last pools of water, and prayed to the sky for the storms that no longer came. The desert did not arrive all at once. It crept across the land like a patient shadow, year after year, century after century. Sand gathered in the hollows, coating the bones of fish that would never swim again, swallowing villages and fields with a whisper. What had once been a world of color began to fade into gold and gray, and the memories of rain were carried only in stories told by the elders. Some stayed and fought against the encroaching dunes, while others packed what they could carry and moved toward the promise of the Nile, where the river still remembered how to flow. Those who remained became the watchers of the end, witnesses to the death of an age. They saw the last trees wither, the last lake dry to salt, and the wind rise to sing across the empty plains. Yet, even in its death, the Sahara was not truly gone. It was transforming, turning from a cradle of life into a vault of memory. The sand, fine as dust and relentless as time, covered everything: bones, tools, carvings, footprints, preserving them in silence. What we now call a desert is not a barren wasteland, but a library sealed by nature, its shelves filled with the remains of forgotten civilizations. Beneath every dune, there may be a story still waiting to breathe again. As the centuries drifted by, the wind became the keeper of secrets. It sculpted the dunes into waves, moving them like an ocean of silence, burying entire landscapes beneath shifting mountains of gold. The people who had once thrived there became legends, their names forgotten, but their essence scattered in the grains of sand. Sometimes the desert reveals its memories for a moment: the edge of a stone tool, the corner of a buried temple, the fossil of a fish that once swam where now only mirage shimmers. Scientists who have walked its breathless expanse speak of ancient shorelines still etched into the rock, of dry riverbeds wide as highways, of forgotten oases that once glittered under the same sun that now burns so mercilessly. Each discovery whispers the same truth: the Sahara remembers. It remembers the footsteps of the first farmers who watched the rain retreat, the laughter of children by vanished lakes, the hands that carved calendars into stone to count the days between storms. And as night falls over its endless horizon, the desert glows beneath the stars, the same stars those ancient people once followed when they left in search of a new home. In that cosmic mirror above, their story continues, written not in ink but in light. The silence of the Sahara is not emptiness. It is the sound of time holding its breath. Beneath its surface, relics sleep, cities swallowed by dunes, monuments lost to erosion, entire river systems frozen in stone. What we call desolation is in truth a preservation, a pause in history that waits to be awakened. Perhaps, one day, when the climate shifts again and the rains return, the desert will bloom once more, and the bones of its first civilizations will rise like ghosts to greet the dawn. The same forces that took paradise away could one day restore it. And when that happens, humanity may look upon the Sahara not as a grave, but as a guardian, the patient keeper of our planet's oldest memories. For now, the wind continues to sweep across its vastness, whispering to those who dare to listen. It tells of rivers that once sang, of animals that once roamed free, of people who loved, built, dreamed, and vanished beneath the golden tide of time. And as you drift deeper into sleep, imagine that quiet sea of sand stretching forever, its dunes breathing slowly, its stories shimmering just beyond reach. Somewhere out there, in the moonlight, the past is still alive, waiting for the dawn to uncover it once again. Beneath the endless dunes of the Sahara, where the sun bakes the earth into silence and the wind carves mountains out of dust, there lies another world, a world unseen, forgotten, yet still alive in whispers. Far below the golden surface, rivers once flowed, their courses now turned to stone, their songs muffled by the passing of millennia. Scientists call them paleochannels, the ghost veins of a vanished paradise, but long before the language of science, ancient travelers called them the veins of the earth. They believed these hidden rivers carried the memory of the world, that even when the surface dried and the rains ceased to fall, water would continue to move beneath, guarding life in secret. If you close your eyes, you can almost hear it, the low hum of movement deep below, the sigh of water running through dark corridors of sand and rock. These subterranean arteries connect what once was a vast network of lakes and wetlands, stretching from the heart of Africa to the shores of the Mediterranean. In the time before the desert, these channels fed forests and grasslands, carving paths for herds, birds, and early humans who followed their shimmer like a promise. When the skies began to close and the rains turned shy, the people watched the rivers disappear one by one. But what they did not see was that the rivers had only gone to sleep, burrowing deeper into the earth, preserving their flow in darkness. Modern satellites have traced their outlines, long and winding scars beneath the dunes, revealing that the Sahara still remembers its watery past. One of the most haunting discoveries came from radar images taken by spacecraft orbiting high above. A great river, now buried under thousands of years of sand, once flowed northward for more than 600 miles, wide as the Nile, powerful as memory itself. It carried life across the continent, and when it vanished, it left behind not only fossils but silence, the stillness that comes after the last drop has fallen. Imagine standing atop a dune, the world around you nothing but wind and gold, and beneath your feet, the bones of rivers still glimmering faintly in the cold earth. Somewhere down there, trapped beneath layers of stone and time, are aquifers, vast oceans locked underground, holding more water than all the surface lakes of the desert combined. It is as if the Sahara hides its heart, keeping it safe until the world is ready to remember. For thousands of years, nomads have spoken of wells that never dry, of springs that bubble up in the most unlikely places, of oases that seem to appear like dreams at the edge of death. They are the breathing holes of these lost rivers, where the underground veins touch the sky for a moment before sinking back into the earth's quiet. Perhaps this is the greatest secret the Sahara holds, that nothing ever truly dies, it merely changes form. The water that once danced in sunlight now moves unseen, shaping the desert from below, nourishing life in silence. When explorers dig deep, they find traces of ancient deltas, places where fish once swam and reeds grew tall. They uncover shells, coral, even the skeletons of crocodiles that roamed where dunes now rise. Each discovery is a heartbeat, faint but steady, telling us that the desert is not dead, it is dreaming. And in that dream, rivers still flow, connecting the past to the present, the visible to the hidden. If we could peel back the layers of sand, we would see the Sahara as a vast, sleeping map, a web of waterways frozen in time. We would see the old lakes of Mega Chad, so large they could have covered modern France, feeding into tributaries that ran across what are now empty basins. We would see valleys shaped by torrents, canyons carved by floods, and plains that once shimmered with wetlands where people fished and sang. In that buried landscape, there are ruins too, stone circles, carved rocks, and mysterious alignments that seem to point toward places where water once gathered. Perhaps those who built them were not only astronomers, but hydrologists of spirit, marking the veins of the living earth. As the climate turned cruel, they followed the last trickles of water to the Nile, carrying their stories of green fields and vanishing rains. Some of those stories became myths, tales of a hidden world beneath the desert where the gods kept the secrets of creation. They spoke of a river that runs forever underground, a river of stars reflected below as the Milky Way glows above. Even today, local legends tell of lights flickering in the dunes on moonless nights, the spirits of the lost waters moving in silence, searching for the sea they once knew. And so, as you breathe slowly now, imagine yourself drifting through that hidden world. The surface above is hot and endless, but down below the air is cool and ancient. The walls of stone glisten faintly, and somewhere far off you can hear the faint echo of dripping water. Each drop is a second of eternity, falling into the dark like memory reclaiming itself. The lost rivers are not gone. They are waiting, patient as the desert itself. Perhaps when the earth tilts again, when the rains return in another cycle of ages, the sands will bloom once more. The rivers will rise to greet the sky, and what was hidden will flow again. Until that day, the Sahara keeps its promise, a silence that is never empty, a stillness that holds the heartbeat of the world. The wind above sings lullabies to the sand, and the sand hums softly to the rivers below, a dialogue of time that never ends. And as you drift deeper into sleep, you can almost feel it, the slow pulse of the planet, the forgotten waters breathing beneath your dreams, whispering that even in the driest desert, life is never truly lost. It only waits to be found again.